Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers. As we get set for today's show, we have game one of the Eastern Conference Finals, Heat and Celtics. We have a couple Stanley Cup game ones, Lightning and Panthers, Blues, Avalanche, and a lot of baseball to go over as we have reached Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. And on today's show, we will get a thorough breakdown of the Heat and the Celtics. We're going to do that with Vince Akins, who joins us all the time during NFL to give us the trends. Also, he's joined us several times to talk about NBA trends, and we bring Vince on now. And Vince, good to see you again. Look, we finally reached the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Heat, they are hosting the Celtics tonight. The Heat, a short favorite, so let's just get it going. Let's fire away on what you got.
Sure. Obviously, looking back at Sunday, a couple of really interesting game sevens there. And I did, I pulled one interesting trend going back to that game seven to alert viewers on one that I posted on social media here before we get into today's game. A really nice game seven specific trend. And that is teams in game sevens that are not more than 3-point dogs and have won game six by at least 7 points. So not heavy underdogs and coming off a comfortable game six win. Those teams are 19-0. Overall in game sevens and 18-1 against the spread. So that was why I posted before game seven. The Celtics obviously won by 13 in game six. That series against the Bucks, and were favored in game seven and kept that nice run going. So that's an interesting one to hold on to in your back pocket as we go forward in the playoffs. Now looking at tonight's game one here, I'm going to start with the looking at the spread, and there's going to be some conflicting information on both ways. So I'm going to throw out several nuggets here and let you guys decide what you like and what you think is most interesting. That's sometimes how it goes when you're handicapping a specific game and not a whole set of 15 games or so slate, depending what you're picking and choosing. Let's start off about as simple as we can get here. Boston has covered their last 8 games as an underdog. That one goes back to March of this season, including 5-0 so far in the playoffs, all those being road playoff games so far. Obviously, the small 1.5 underdog in this game, but 8-0 against the spread as an underdog going back to March here. So digging a little further, we have a couple that are in favor of the Heat here. Starting with a playoff-specific one here, I thought was kind of interesting. This goes back to the last 5 seasons. The home team is 7-0 overall and 7-0 against the spread in game one of a playoff series when the total is no more than 209. So we're looking at lower total games. Obviously, when you think about today's NBA, if you spread that one back a little further, obviously all kinds of games are head totals under 209. So I limited that to the last 5 years. This one was actually active once so far this postseason, and it was Miami's last round against Philly, in which they won 106-92 in game one against the 76ers. It was also a low total game. So we have that again here. Miami at home. Low total game. It's particularly, you think about low totals, 204.5 is pretty low for game one of a series. Not necessarily when you get to game 5, game 6, game 7, totals tend to drop more in that direction. But this is a low total. It's obviously expected to be a defensive game in game one of the series. Also, for what it's worth, Miami's 5-0 straight up against the spread. So it goes back to 2014 at home in the first game of playoff series. And actually, if you extend that a little further, the past 4 series where they've had home court advantage, they're 8-0 overall and against the spread in the first 2 games of the series while hosting. So that obviously includes their 2 series so far this year. One covered both games against Atlanta and against Philadelphia, those first 2 home games. So, 2000, the other series go back a little bit of ways, but it is an Eric Spoelstra coach team over that span, and some interesting things there. Gotten several more against the spread nuggets here, starting with, we talked about low total in this series. So now I want to go back to teams that didn't allow a lot of points in their last game, which obviously was the case for Boston, both of these teams, but particularly Boston, only allowing 81 points to Milwaukee in their game 7 victory. So this one goes back to 2014. Teams are 9-1 against the spread in game 1 of a series when they allowed no more than 83 points last game. So you think about the kind of teams that have won some late series wins to close out a series going to game 1 of next series. That defensive strength does hold up pretty well going forward. Definitely one interesting note about that Celtics game 7 victory was the amount of 3-pointers that Boston took that game. That may be the first thing when you're looking at the box score that jumps off the page. Even more than 81 points allowed was the 55 3-pointers that Boston took in that game. And so it's a small sample size, but looking at games where Boston attempted more than 53 pointers, they are 0-5 straight up and against the spread the next game. And obviously, that goes back, that spans the history of the Celtics, but those games have all occurred in the last 5 years. You think about any game that a team's taken more than 53 pointers, and those have pretty much all have occurred in the last 5 years, including all the ones the Celtics here. So just 2 more nuggets here. I realize I'm going back and forth, and we can break down a couple of these, looking at each team here. So noteworthy about Miami's Game 6 victory against Philly to close out that series was a 99-90 Heat win. So a pretty low scoring game for Miami to win. That has been kind of played to Miami's strengths. And you think about what some of Miami's strengths are, being able to rely on their defense. The Heat are 8-0 overall and 7-1 against the spread, going back to August 2020. So we're going back to the bubble here forward. Coming off a win where they scored less than 100 points last game. So coming off a really defensive-driven win. Not only was their defense good, but it needed to be based on their offensive scoring in that last game, and that was certainly the case in Game 6 versus the 76ers. And a final one, well, actually, I have 2 more ones, maybe nugget here I'll throw at you. But first, this is a long playoff trend, and one that's kind of found interesting. So we're looking at number 1 seeds in each conference, and this one goes back to the span of our playoff database, 20 years now. When their home favorites are no more than 4 points against a team that's not a number 1 seed. So we're not talking about finals, number 1 versus number 1 matchups where you have a reasonable amount of those. But otherwise, a small home favorite that's a number 1 seed, 5-25 against the spread in the postseason. So that's why I've thrown several favoring the Heat in that game. But that's a pretty strong one going against the Heat here. Small home favorites that are number 1 seeds, not facing a number 1 seed, have been really poorly performed in the postseason. And then, a final nugget here, and then we can talk about some of these against the spread, but this is a possible one tonight. Obviously, Marcus Smart, questionable for the game. It does seem like there's some indication he might play, but I just want to look at how the Celtics performed this season without Marcus Smart in the lineup. They are 3-9 against the spread in those games, and they've scored 4 fewer points per game and allowed 2 more points per game without Smart in the lineup. Obviously, they won and covered against the Bucks last round in the one game that Smart missed, but overall this season, there's been noticeable changes offensively and defensively for the Celtics without Smart in the lineup.
Yeah, I found another one too, Vince, that you said the Heat are 5-0 straight up against the spread since 2014 at home, the first game of playoff series. That Eric Spoelstra, I believe it's 13-2, his last 15 home openers in a game when they're at game 1 at home. So he's done well, and that goes back to LeBron and Wade days, and I get that, but for whatever reason, the Heat have performed well in these first game of a playoff series playing at home. The 2 losses, okay, I don't know if you'll remember these. The 2 losses came back in 2013 during their title run. They lost to the Spurs at home in game 1 in the finals and lost to the Bulls as 13-point favorites in the second round. So, again, they've just been, I don't want to say automatic, but pretty good in that spot.
Yeah, I remember that Spurs one. Obviously, the Bulls one would have slipped my mind. But yeah, just think about how they've played so far this postseason. Have come out and really dominated against Atlanta and Philadelphia pretty comfortably in those game 1s. And you think about maybe some of the reasons this might make sense. Some extra rest. This is a team that, a little veteran team, even back in, you talked about those earlier days where a veteran team that could use a little extra rest going into game 1. But very well-prepared team, a team that's known for being pretty good scouting-wise. Those things may have some extra edge at game 1 of a series, and hosting doesn't hurt that by any means.
And also, too, before we get to your total numbers, the Celtics 8-0 against the spread since March as an underdog, and I believe, the game 3, the closing line for Milwaukee in that game 3 where the Celtics lost by 2, I think it was a 3, 2.5, closed at 2. Like, that's a tough one to determine that for record purposes. But I believe it's 13 or 14-1 against the spread. Boston, their last 15 overall on the road. The only game they didn't cover was at Oklahoma City, laying like 13, and they won by 10. I think they were up big in that game, and Oklahoma City came back to cover. But just even on the road, Boston has just been unbelievable the last few months.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's shown in the postseason here. But yeah, you're right. It goes back to February, March of the regular season as well. They have they have not looked phased playing on the road. Obviously, they've played in tough environments so far this postseason. Well, I guess you can debate how tough of an environment Brooklyn is, but certainly Milwaukee is a tough environment in which they've played well on the road this postseason. You're right. That last series home court until Game 7, which ironically was what Boston played for and Milwaukee didn't play for back in the regular season. Until Game 7 of that series, home court wasn't a huge factor for Celtics Bucks.
So now you have a couple total trends, and it's just interesting because, like you mentioned, how low this total is. That we saw totals 215s, 210s. Like now we're sneaking towards 200 all of a sudden, and it's warranted because the way the Heat have played defensively at home, they've been excellent. But what total trends do you have going into this game tonight?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you think about two of the top 3 defensive teams in the league all season playing here warrants some of that low total, and they've both even gotten a step better in the postseason. The Heat in particular, for the majority of the postseason, have been really strong on the defensive end. So I narrowed this one down. We're only going to go over a few trends, 2 team ones and then 1 league one for the total. Starting with some of the factors. Well, we'll start with the factor we just talked about there. Low total game, obviously 204.5 right now. So you look how each team performs in low total games. The Heat are pretty even as far as their total performance or over-under performance in those low total games. The Celtics, however, have gone under 9 straight games. This goes back to 2019, 2020. So the last 3 seasons, playing with rest, so not an unrested game, with a total under 207. So that's obviously what we have here. They have a day of rest, minus plenty of rest. Low total game. Boston, those have tended to be warranted, if anything, have continued to go under. Also, I mentioned Boston's strong defense for performance in Game 7 versus Bucks, obviously, is what carried them forward to this Eastern Conference Finals. Going back to December 2018, so pretty similar time frame. Boston 1-10 over under, so 1 over 10 unders, coming off a game where they allowed less than 87 defense or less than 87 points on defense. So we're talking some of the most impressive defensive performances. Boston has carried those forward into their next game as well. And final one here, just an interesting nugget. Again, things that stand out from the box score looking at Game 6 of Heat 76ers. The 76ers attempted only 7 free throws in that game. And actually, Miami only attempted 11 free throws in that game. So really low numbers on both sides. But the 7 free throws in particular is almost a historically known number as far as the playoffs go. So the last 20 playoff years, there's only been 7 teams that are coming off a game where they allowed no more than 7 free throw attempts last game. And those next games have all gone under. So it's 7-0 to the under, coming off a game where you allowed no more than 7 free throw attempts. And those games have gone under by over 20 points per game, 20.7 points per game. So it has not been, other than 1 or 2, those not been particularly close to the total either. So you think about the ability to prevent fouling, prevent free throws. Obviously, those are easy attempts with the clock stopped to push towards an over. A team that did not allow that in their last playoff game, that tends as a lower number the next game as well. It's one of the reasons that help drive the unders in those games.
Now, I know you didn't bring any trends, Vince, for the Western Conference Finals, but I want to go over this with you really quick.
Sure.
So Dallas wins Game 7. All right, convincing, like blowout fashion, 57-27. They're up at the half. They destroy Phoenix. I'm curious, and I'm not going to say right this second, but at least anything you can remember. Road team wins Game 7. You just mentioned the Celtics winning at home Game 7, but road teams winning Game 7, how they fare in Game 1. I'm curious how they fare if they came off of that much of a blowout. Maybe not 30-plus points, but even a double-digit blowout or double-digit victory in Game 7 and going to Game 1 of the next series. Do you have anything for that, or is there anything that you can remember just going into Game 1 thinking, okay, is Dallas going to keep that momentum up? Obviously, they stayed out west. They didn't travel back home. But to keep that momentum up against a Golden State team who had been off for a few days of staying at home?
Yeah, so I just pulled up a couple of numbers here as we talked because I had a feeling this is where that conversation was going. Starting with it's looking at teams that just won a Game 7 on the road, and those teams are 5-12 overall and 6-10-1 against the spread in the first game of the next round, including the last 3 years. Those teams are 1-5 or 1-4 overall against the spread. There was a couple of circumstances last year, obviously. Atlanta won a Game 7, went on and upset the Bucks in Game 1 of last season in the Eastern Conference Finals. So that was the outlier, but the Bucks also, well, actually, that was a bit of an outlier looking at it because both teams won in those situations. Now that I'm looking at it, but yeah, in general, little slower performance than normal. I'm looking at the margin here. Those teams with the 6-10-1 mark have failed to cover by an average of about 2 points per game. So you're right in that these teams are already. You see the line at 5.5 here. Those teams on average have been 4.5 point underdogs in those games. Game 1, almost always on the road. If you win a road Game 7 last round, you're almost always going to be going on the road again next round because you're likely to be the lower seed in Game 1. As far as big wins in the postseason, teams coming off of a 20-plus point win in Game 7. So obviously that applies today as well with the Celtics. Nothing too exciting there. 5-6 against the spread, 5-6 overall in Game 1, the next round.
Okay, I mean, because I think a lot of people are going to try to jump on Dallas and just say, "Oh, look what they did against Phoenix." But then, do you have that letdown considering Dallas still went 1-3 on the road in that series? They lost Game 5 by 30 points, and then they come back in Game 7 and trample Phoenix, and the Suns didn't play well. I mean, you play that game 10 times, you're not getting that same result 9 times. It's probably 1 out of 10, I'm sure. But Golden State, I really wonder with them too, Vince, just to wrap up the NBA, we'll get to baseball in a second, that after this Memphis series, which, they had the first game that could have gone either way. Ja missed the layup at the end, then he gets hurt later. They got blown out in Game 5. They win Game 6. That, I don't know, maybe shaking off this Memphis team that was really feisty. Now Dallas, who beat Golden State 3 times this year. People will look at that. I just wonder now if Golden State will roll them in Game 1 after what we saw in Game 7 from Dallas at Phoenix.
Yeah, there definitely could. I could see some letdown factor. One more nugget. Looking at this here, again, not a crazy performance against the spread, but actually, if you just go back to 2005, 9 teams that are entering Game 1 of a playoff round, coming off a playoff game where they covered by at least 25 points. So obviously, the Mavericks had one of the largest covers in playoff history in that Game 7. Of those teams going back to 2005 are 9-2-1 against the spread in Game 1. So there hasn't been as much letdown as you might figure. And those teams are 8-4 overall in those games as well. So, one way, obviously looking against the spread performance, the past games, just one way to think about a big victory or a big emotional high going into Game 1 of the next round. But those teams have performed fairly well. So, just looking at it without those numbers here, I do think there's some of the concerns that you bring up about going from obviously that shocking. I think, even if you thought Dallas was going to win Game 7, I don't think anyone projected it to look anything like it did. The emotional high of that game, the quick turnaround, the Warriors having a couple extra days rest, being the team with a little more experience, getting to the next round of the Western Conference Finals. I do think there's definitely some red flags for Dallas in this game.
All right, yeah. So we got 4 teams left down to the Final 4 in the NBA. Major League Baseball, you got a big one. You got Guardians and the Reds coming up tonight in Cleveland. So the old rivals, they hook up. But a couple trends that you have isolated for baseball. What do you have with that?
I believe it's the Ohio Cup, or there's a cup involved. I'm not going to pretend to know what it is. Just a couple interesting baseball trends while we have a few minutes. Starting with this is kind of a big one. This goes back to last year. The Cubs coming off a huge victory, a 7+ run victory. They are 0-7 going back to April of last season. They won 9-0 against the Pirates yesterday. What's particularly interesting about that, obviously, you think a team off a big victory. You don't think such a poor performance in the next game. Also, the Cubs are favored in 4 of those 7 losses. They're favored again tonight, hosting the Pirates in Game 2 of that series. So big wins have not established any momentum for the Cubs recently, and we'll see if that happens again tonight. Also, looking at one interesting total trend here for the team, and this one only goes back to September of last season. But the Orioles are 0-11-1 on the over/under, going back to the middle of September last year, is a home underdog of more than +145. So we're talking pretty large home underdog. Tonight they're +180, +185, depending where you're looking right now, hosting the Yankees. And so we have 11 unders and a push in there. The Orioles have averaged 2.8 runs per game in those contests and allowed only 3.3 runs per game, which might be the more impressive of the two stats. But you think about those 6.1 runs per game scored in those games have all nice under margin. And finally, this was just one that stood out to me, so I decided to look this up when we were talking baseball today. Dylan Cease's line from his last start, really unique, and one you're not going to see very often, in which he pitched 4 innings, struck out 11 batters, and allowed 6 runs. Just looking at today's information, what was going on after that one stood out to me. You see a guy, got 12 batters out, 11 of those were by strikeouts, but also allowed 6 runs last game. So really interesting stat line. So I decided to look up players who had more than 10 strikeouts, or pitchers who had more than 10 strikeouts last game, but also allowed more than 5 runs. In fact, it's only happened 3 times in the past 6 seasons. That's as far back as those stats go. The next game, those starters are 3-0, and their teams allowed combined 2 runs over the 3 games. So that's the starting pitchers and the bullpen as well. Combined 2 runs and going 3-0. It's obviously giving up that many runs while still striking out so many batters has been an outlier. What small sample size was made a difference going forward is the impressive strikeout numbers rather than the runs that they allowed the next game, and those have carried over the next game, allowing very few runs. So that's absolutely an interesting little nugget for today's day game.
Can you explain something to me before we let you go about your Guardians? What is it? Why they're so inconsistent? I mean, they had those 2 big games in Kansas City earlier this year. I know the A's aren't very good. They swept them out there. There are times they look decent. Other times they can't hit the ball. Yeah,
and honestly, that's probably the offensive side. It's a little bit of a stronger than was expected coming into this season. Inconsistent is better than just bad, and that's I think what a lot of people anticipate for the Guardians.
Bad, so yeah.
But yeah, young hitters have been a bit streaky. I don't know if there's a particular reason for the streakiness of their offense. I think, they've been a up and down team. I think their starting pitching's been a lot more hit or miss than was expected going into the season as well. And starting with Shane Bieber. Bieber's had a lot of.
Hey, Vince, is he shot, Shane Bieber?
Yeah, his velocity is definitely down, and there's some stats where his movement's down as well. I definitely think there's some cause for concern, and I wouldn't go betting on him based on the name until we see an uptick in velocity or a little more of a track record this season, because it's not just necessarily been unlucky looking at the numbers he's allowed this season. There is changes in movement, velocity that I'd be concerned about, and it wouldn't shock me to see eventually see a shoulder issue or him being shut down for a little bit or something like that. Who knows if the Guardians thought that would probably happen already, but it wouldn't shock me to see that.
I backed them Saturday and Sunday at Minnesota. Saturday, the game, they won an extra innings. And Sunday, McKenzie pitched well. He's going to get any offense going against the Twins. So I think that's what's frustrating is we've seen them bust out at times. And I know everyone does that, but other times the bats are they're nowhere to be found. Yeah,
and we'll see here. They've had a couple of day of rest yesterday, a couple of days off last week. Some COVID issues with the team late last week. So we'll see. Obviously, if there's a team to put things together against, it's the Reds. So we'll see if they can do that starting tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. And Plesac, he's a heavy favorite. Overton's pitched well for the Reds. I mean, the Reds are playing a little better. After they were 3-22, they're 9-26. So I mean, they did pitch a no-hitter the other day and lost. So, that's the season for the Cincinnati Reds. But
that's what I pulled up too. But that's such a small sample size.
Yeah.
There's nothing noteworthy to tell you about. I believe that's happened one other time in the last 20 years. So it was certainly unique to see a team pitch a no-hitter and lose the game.
They're playing a little. I mean, the Reds are – look, there's not a lot there. There's not a lot in the cupboard with the old Reds. So we'll see what happens in the Buckeye, Ohio Cup or whatever you guys want to call it up there. But anyway, Vince, we appreciate the time. Vince Akins, you could find him on Twitter at SB Breakers, and he's got all of the trends for the NBA, for Major League Baseball, and then again in the fall with the NFL. So looking forward to that. Vince, thank you so much for the time as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. I'll just say real quick, I can't believe that we didn't spend the 20 minutes breaking down the NBA draft lottery and betting odds. Already nothing more exciting than betting the NBA draft lottery, right? So
who's going to win it?
I'm gonna say, obviously this is a complete. I'm gonna say OKC. They've been on the precipice. They've had their chances. This is the year. Just throwing out a team now.
I don't even know who the top pick is. I mean, it's crazy. So all of this is it's not like the old days. We're like, oh, this team's gonna get Tim Duncan, or they're gonna get Shaquille O'Neal, or someone like that. You're kind of like, I don't, hopefully this guy works out, but we shall see. Vince, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, sounds good. Good luck, everyone.
All right, there is Vince Akins. Always good talking with him, and Vince, he definitely he's on top of all of the trends. I know he's a big Cleveland fan, being based there in Ohio, and you have the Ohio Cup, or whatever you want to call the showdown with the Guardians and the Reds tonight. So that's that's always fun. But you know what? I looked at that game too, and we'll go over to the baseball in just a second. But the Guardians, I don't know how you can lay 160 with them, even though the Reds have been terrible this year. I don't know how much I trust Zach Plesac in that spot, but it's an interesting game. We'll talk about that coming up in just a moment. I want to tell you about some of our hot handicappers on Vegas Insider. Joe Williams, 10-1 run in the NHL playoffs, and I know he's got a selection tonight on the Lightning and the Panthers in the Eastern Conference, so check out Joe's pick on that one. Bruce Marshall, NBA, is back tonight, 3-1 on Sunday. He's 9-3 in his last 12 playoff picks. Also, Mark Franco, he is the NBA money leader this year, over 30 units in the NBA, 2-0 on Sunday, and 15-6 his last 21 picks in the association. So check out Mark's pick for Heat Celtics tonight, and also we'll have game 1 tomorrow between the Mavericks and the Warriors. So keep an eye out on our hot handicappers at Vegas Insider. Now, I want to tell you about what's going on tonight. And we'll go with the Stanley Cup playoffs first. Game 1, the Lightning and the Panthers. They meet up at FLA Live Arena this evening, and the Panthers a heavy favorite. The President's Cup winner, the President's Trophy, I should say, not the President's Cup, the President's Trophy. This isn't sailing. So the Panthers, coming off of the 4-2 win over Washington in the opening series. Tampa Bay needed 7 to beat Toronto. And last year, the Lightning knocked out the Panthers in 6 games. So now the Panthers looking to get some revenge. This year, the Panthers splitting the 4 meetings with the Lightning, and you had some wacky scores in the last 2 meetings. End of December, 9-3 win by the Panthers at home. Then in late April, Lightning won 8-4 down in Florida. So you've had, and also there was an overtime win by Tampa. Panthers also won in Tampa. So it's been all over the place with these two teams. And obviously, Andrei Vasilevsky, the goalie for the Lightning, he's fantastic. Sergei Bobrovsky's had a really good postseason. And the Panthers coming off 3 straight wins, 2 in overtime. And they did lose the first game of the Washington series at home. So the Panthers trying to avoid that again. And last year, when they met up with the Lightning, Tampa Bay won the first 2 down in South Florida. Panthers won game 3 in overtime. Lightning won game 4. Panthers won game 5. Then the Lightning shut out the Panthers in game 6 to advance. But the Panthers now, that's the last 2 playoff series in which they've lost game 1 at home. So just something to throw out there. But the Panthers, a heavy favorite tonight against the Lightning. All right. Blues and the Avalanche, they hook up in Colorado tonight. The Avalanche have been off for a little bit because they swept the Predators in the first round. Blues off their 6-game series win over Minnesota. The Blues were down 2-1, but then won the next 3. So, and also St. Louis's offense, 5 goals in each of the last 3 games for St. Louis. So the offense has really woken up, and they've allowed 5 goals, obviously, 5 goals in that 3-game stretch in which they won each time. But now you get Colorado, and Colorado is elite. This year, St. Louis won the first matchup on the road. Colorado won the next 2. All 3 games went over the total. Tonight's total at 6.5. And again, the Avalanche have been off for a little while. The Blues They last played back 5 days ago. So they played back on May 12th. Avalanche last played on May 9th. So they've had a little bit of time. But the Avs coming off of 5 goals, 7 goals, 7 goal. They only had a 1-2 goal game, but Avs scored a ton of goals against Nashville. But a little bit of a step up here with St. Louis. They're a pretty quality team. All right, let's run through the night action in Major League Baseball. You got a lot of day games in Major League Baseball today. But let's go through some of the night action. Last night, the Tigers ended up beating the Rays 3-2 as a heavy dog. Tigers again a dog. They've been playing a little better of late, which you got to give them. 13-23, but also Detroit's won 4 in a row. Tampa Bay now, they, after winning 2 of 3 against Toronto, their offense has not been great recently. They've scored 6 runs the last 3 games. And Shane McClanahan, who tossed 7 innings opposite Shohei Ohtani in his last start against the Angels back on May 11th, he gets the start tonight for the Rays. And McClanahan, who has struck out 11 batters in 2 of his last 3 starts, the Rays are 1-2 in his last 3 home starts. So I'm going to put out there. It's still a heavy line. Marlins, who beat up the Nationals last night in Miami, they are back at it tonight. And again, the Marlins are a heavy favorite. The Nationals, the problem was, if you watched last night's game, if you caught any of it, Sandy Alcantara, who is one of the Marlins' top pitchers, he and Pablo Lopez, the Marlins escaped the first 2 innings. Alcantara, he gave up 3 hits in the first inning, only allowed 1 run, a couple walks in the second inning, and then it turned out that they couldn't get any runs, and Washington did nothing the rest of the game. And the Marlins picked up a big win, 8-2. So the Nationals have allowed the last 4 games 8, 6, and 6 runs, while the Marlins, they just can't really get a lot of momentum going. They had that 7-game winning streak, but since then, the Marlins have not won consecutive games. So, and the offense has been shut down in a lot of those. So you wonder if that happens again tonight between the Marlins and the Nationals. The Yankees and the Orioles, they hook up at Camden Yards in New York, continues to play very well, 26-9. Jameson Taillon on the mound for the Yankees, Spencer Watkins for the Orioles, and a 6-2 win for the Yankees last night. They continue to roll. Orioles now have dropped 4 in a row, and they've scored a total of 5 runs in those 4 games. Watkins, who, hey, I mean, he's just a fade machine, but his last 2 starts, actually, as a home dog, the Orioles beat the Red Sox and the Twins. Now, he has 1 decision this year because the 2 starts against Minnesota and Boston, he didn't get through the 5th, so he was not eligible for the win. But his last start, he gave up 7 earned runs, worst start of the year against the Cardinals, 10-1 loss. And for Jameson Taillon, he is 3-1, ERA under 3. Yankees are 5-0 his last 5 starts. So now you're laying a ton if you want to take him coming up tonight. We mentioned the Ohio Cup, whatever we want to call it, the Buckeye State Cup between the Reds and the Guardians tonight. And Cincinnati, they are coming off of a pair of losses to Pittsburgh on the road, especially the game that they threw a no-hitter and still lost 1-0, of course. The Pirates get 1 run on no hits, and they beat the Reds. Guardians, though, they lost the last 2 at Minnesota, and Zach Plesac, who actually last year was on the losing end of a no-hitter against the Reds when Wade Miley tossed the no-hitter. Plesac actually went pretty far in that game, not allowing a run. Cincinnati got 3 in the top of the 9th to win it 3-0. So that was a 0-0 game for a long time. But Plesac, though, his last start came against the White Sox. He cashed a plus 170 dog. First time Plesac is a favorite this year. And look at that, he's laying 167, at least at SI Sportsbook. Phillies and the Padres, they are meeting in Philadelphia tonight. And Mike Clevenger starting for San Diego. Still don't know who's starting for the Phillies. They're at the undecided point. And for Clevenger, he's been a nice addition to the Padres rotation. He started once against the Guardians, his old team, and then against the Cubs. It wasn't really sharp, 4 1/3, 3 runs, 6 hits, but still, Clevenger coming back from the Tommy John surgery, and Philadelphia, they come into this one off that road trip in which they took 3 of 4 from the Dodgers, took 2 of 3 from Seattle, should have swept the Dodgers. They blew that last game. The Mariners and the Blue Jays in Toronto, and the Jays favored here. Logan Gilbert coming off losses his last 2 starts, both at home, both as a favorite against Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Before that, Seattle had won his first 5 starts, 4 of those on the road. So Gilbert has been good on the road. Jose Barrios, not so good his last 2 starts for the Jays, allowing 11 earned runs his last 10 innings, but both those games came on the road. The Blue Jays did beat the Mariners last night. The Brewers shut out the Braves 1-0. And the last 3 games there in Milwaukee, they played the 2 in the NLDS, all low scoring. So you wonder if it's going to be another low scoring affair tonight. And you had Freddie Peralta outduel Ian Anderson last evening, where tonight it's Adrian Hauser and Tucker Davidson on the mound. Braves are minus 11 units on the season. That's a big disappointment for that, for the defending champions. But Adrian Hauser, who last pitched against the Reds, got lit up. Actually, his last 2 starts against Cincinnati, he's allowed 12 runs. Before that, he had pitched much better. And now he's back at home where Milwaukee is 2-1 in his 3 starts, but the over is hit in each of Hauser's last 3 outings. The Pirates and the Cubs from Chicago. Last night, the Cubs jumped out to an 8-0 lead in the first inning on the Pirates. So we'll see what happens here tonight. So the Pirates offense, 1 run the last 2 games. It's been an embarrassment. JT Brubaker, who had some upside, you would say, 5-13 last year. He's 0-3 out of the gate this year. Last 2 starts came against the Reds, both as a favorite. His last 2 starts as a dog, the Pirates have won against the Padres and Cubs. So maybe you look at Brubaker tonight in that role. But Chicago, they are a nice favorite there. The Red Sox favored again against the Astros, ALCS rematch. Boston beat Houston last night. Red Sox playing a little better. They now have won 3 of 4. They took 2 of 3 from Texas over the weekend. Houston, they have done pretty well off a loss this year. They bounced back well, 8-2 to the under the last 10 games. And Jose Urquidy starts for the Astros. He's 2-1, 4.40 ERA. Astros 3-0 his last 3 starts. He got racked in the ALCS last year by Boston. Nathan Eovaldi has not really been great, even though his ERA isn't bad, 3.15, but the Red Sox are 0-4 in his last 4 starts. The Rangers ended up coming back to beat the Angels last night. And the Rangers dog tonight again against Reed Detmers, who threw a no-hitter his last time out against Tampa Bay. Taylor Hearn actually pitched well against Kansas City his last start last week, started as a favorite. Now he's an underdog. But Detmers, when he faced the Rangers earlier this season in Arlington, Angels won that game, and that game went over the total. Twins and the A's tonight from Oakland, and Dylan Bundy has not been good, to say the least, in his last 2 starts. He has been totally racked. He's allowed 15 earned runs, 18 hits in his last 2 starts, both on the road. ERA at 5.76. James Caprillion starts for Oakland, and he's off a good start against Detroit his last time out. No decision, but the A's did win. And the final game we'll look at, the Giants and the Rockies in Colorado. Alex Cobb and Chad Kuhl on the mound. And for Cobb, he, a couple starts ago, really struggled against Washington, but bounced back against Colorado in his last start, 5 1/3, 3 hits, an earned run, 7-1 win at home, and now he gets the Rockies on the road. And Chad Kuhl, the former Pittsburgh Pirate, he was on the losing side against Alex Cobb last time out. Kuhl started the season in which Colorado was 4-0 in those starts. He's lost his last 2, but both came on the road. And Colorado 2-0 in his home starts, 2.02 ERA. So that could be something where Kuhl pitched a little better at the friendly confines of Coors Field. So we'll see if that's the case coming up tonight. Before we get out of here, I want to remind you also about our social media. You can check us out on Twitter at Vegas Insider. That is our handle. And also, we have some videos this week for the big events. PGA Championship. That video was released a little earlier today. Billy Andrade, a professional golfer, I spoke with him looking ahead to the PGA Championship. It's on Thursday. It starts Thursday in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we'll see if Scotty Scheffler can build off the Masters win. He's one of the favorites along with John Rahm. We'll see what Tiger does as well. But we have that. Also, we'll have a preview for the Preakness Stakes. Anthony Stabile as well, the Big A. He will join me. So check out those videos on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. Also, we have a preview for Celtics Heat tonight. And we'll have a preview tomorrow for Mavericks Warriors for Game 1. So all of that you can check out on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. So we would greatly appreciate if you went over there and you checked it out, and like and subscribe to our channel too. We would greatly appreciate that. So that is it for today's show. We'll be back with you coming up tomorrow at noon Eastern time. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bets.